Hey there, Squirrel Army, how's it going for today? And today I want to discuss what makes a Pokemon challenge interesting, at least in my opinion. So, I think that any Pokemon, pretty much, there are a few exceptions, but pretty much any Pokemon that has base stats that are above, your starter average starter base stats, around 200 or so, whatever. I think that's roughly what most starters kind of average or whatnot. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on this. Someone's going to say, hey, the base stats are this or whatever. Yeah, sure, fine, that's cool, whatever. I'm not going to look it up. I should know, I guess, but I can't remember every single little detail or whatever, whatnot. But anyway, I think that if your Pokemon has whatever is the actual average, I don't know what it is, as I said, higher base stat average than the average starter Pokemon, then it's probably not going to be a very interesting run for the most part, because once you have a strong Pokemon, it is very easy to run through the game. Now, yes, you can have bad type matchups for them in some parts and whatnot, but the other parts will make up for that, and perhaps you'll have to get to higher levels to power through those things. And if you say, oh, well, I'm also playing on a level cap, things like this, yeah, sure, that can make it more interesting. Certainly. So the more, I think the more challenging it is, the better off it is as a challenge, because that's what I think people want out of these sorts of style of challenge videos, which is something that I do want to do. And I think like the Eevee and whatnot and Pikachu that you get in Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee probably have higher base stats than I think they did from memory than your average first form starter or whatnot. But still, I think that was still a challenge for the most part. I still think that was an all-right challenge for the most part. But that's what I think for, like, single Pokemon runs. And the same probably for multi-Pokemon runs, unless it's, like, something where, you've just got one of the worst types, I guess, like Bug or Ice or something like that. Something that doesn't have a lot of super effective damage realistically, doesn't have a lot of great types realistically, and doesn't really have, or has a lot of weaknesses that are, very prevalent throughout the entire game. Now, that doesn't really happen with, with a lot of types for the most part. So again, I'm saying that in general, just saying, hey, if there is a game that happens to say, hey, here's all of these types that, happen to check this type, like Psychic does in like OG Gen 1. It's just like super OP. It's one of those things that you should be thinking, okay, well, I want to find a way to, have a Psychic type, because that's stupidly good. And, well, what are the best Psychic types? You might as well start playing, those Pokemon, because they're really good. And there's not much that checks them in that generation. But again, that's that generation, like there's nothing really like that anymore. The company tends to try to balance things out. Like Bug is still underpowered as hell, but still like, and there's still not that many great Bug Pokemon or, really strong Bug Pokemon. There's like a couple that are okay-ish. But again, like you could say, well, yeah, sure, this Pokemon has base stats above, an average first form starter, but it's still an interesting challenge because of the challenge of like the type or whatever it is, saying, hey, well, does this Pokemon, actually get good, well, not stab moves, but good stab moves? And things like that, or does it get good coverage moves, or is it something that, it's like, well, yeah, sure, it might be a bit above, the average first form starter, but not that much more above. Plus, then if it's your only Pokemon, it's got to serve the role of several fully evolved Pokemon by the end of the game, realistically. Um, so there are some exceptions in some regards, especially if you say, well, my Pokemon's a special attacker, but it never gets a really good special attacking move, like above, 60 base power or whatever. Something like that, or 65 or whatever else it is. It never gets an 80 base power move, or it only gets an 80 base power move at level like 90, 80 or 90 or 75 or something like that. Something ridiculous. Really, really high. But at that point, like, you might be at that point, who knows, by the end of the game, just because you might need to be at very high levels to, try to complete the end of the game, being one Pokemon and trying to take on so much. So you never know. But again, like, even saying that, that's not that incredible to have just an 80 base power move at the end of the game. That's probably not really that much. It is a bit of a power spike, but still, it's not that much more of a power spike that it's like, wow, so overpowering. So it's like, especially when you're saying, oh, well, my Pokemon, again, it's a special attacker or it's a physical attacker, and this is actually, using its other attack stat or whatever, that it's, only got like half as many base stats in. So if your Pokemon gets, something like Aurora Beam or whatever, and it's like Gyarados, it's like, yeah, sure, but it's still pretty good. It's not the best, but because it's a physical attacker, but it's still like, it still has decent-ish special. It's not like its special is terrible, So if you have a Pokemon that's got terrible of the opposite sort of side of attack that you need to be attacking with, and those are the only type of moves that you get, then it could be an interesting run. So that's why I'm thinking about this. I'm interested in making more of these style of runs, so I'm trying to think of Pokemon that would be interesting to see out there. And I don't think it's interesting to see me go and say, okay, I'm going to try to do this with Charizard or Mewtwo or whatever. Maybe if you say, oh, well, try to beat the one of the fastest times in the game. Yeah, sure, maybe that's interesting to say, hey, let's figure out, or how fast you can do this. Like, that could be interesting in that regard. Like, if you put certain things on it to say, okay, let's use Mewtwo, one of the strongest Pokemon in the game or whatever, and let's see how fast we can do this game or whatever. That's the challenge, not, try to win with Mewtwo, because winning with Mewtwo is probably going to be pretty easy, or whatever it is, like one of the strongest Pokemon that you can think of from basically the start of the game. And then going, okay, well, how fast can we win the game? Like, instead. Like, so I'm trying to think of these little things that would add to it. So, like, if people do decide to say, hey, I want to see this or I want to see that, we have to add extra wrinkles or extra challenges. Like, I guess I usually use no items in battle, bar Pokeballs or whatever, and whatnot. That sort of thing, because again, it's just like, well, that's a little cheap for the most part, and it gets overrated really quickly. I don't really love double team, things like that, but it's one of those things. Sometimes you've got to use some of these things, like double team or whatever, and whatnot, in battles, because it's like, well, you just can't, really can't win, and even with double team, you sometimes can't win and things like that. Depending on what the Pokemon is and what, you're having to face, and, even if you're at level 100 and all this other stuff. So, yeah, I'm trying to just come up with things that would be interesting for you guys to see. And, yeah, I don't know. There's, it's certainly, there's a lot of the ROMs of the old games and whatnot out there. As you guys might know, but still, I haven't played any of them. I played them back in the day when I was a kid, but that's about it. I remember that most of them are actually pretty bad, on memory, and I've actually seen a lot of people play the old games, and, not the graphics. The graphics are obviously not as good as what they have today, obviously, but just the way the games function and whatnot is a lot different back then to what they, function now and whatnot and things like that. So the modern battle mechanics do really help out the game and the gameplay and the balance of the game. But also just better Pokemon and better moves and like that sort of thing, and better abilities and natures and things like that and whatnot. All that sort of stuff really comes into it later on, and there's more gimmicks. Like Marwa, like it's a single stage Pokemon, but you can Mega Evolve it in X and Y or whatever else it is. Things like this. Yes, we're going to do it with a Mawile or whatever else it is. One single stage Pokemon that has, fairly bad base stats for the most part, or whatever. But what's that? Oh, we've got a Mega. But yeah, like you wouldn't want to do that in some regards because it's like, well, like how can we make this balanced? Like, because again, it's like, I don't think it lasts. It's not like it doesn't last throughout the whole game or the whole match or whatever you want to call it. Once you Mega Evolve, so could be there. It could be worthwhile to Mega Evolve at the start, but it's a little bit like that's a little bit stinky poo poo. Same with like Gigantamax and things like that. Like it's like I almost never use it like in the games. Z moves are one off, so you wouldn't really have to worry about that. So it's like, well, sure, we used a Z move or whatever, but it was the last Pokemon, which we probably would have killed anyway or whatever. Who knows? But it's just one of those things. It's like these things of thinking, well, I don't know that any of that stuff would be in any game or whatever else it is, any kind of gimmick, but just saying, hey, these gimmicks exist. If we bring along one of these Pokemon that, that happens to have a Mega Evolution or a Gigantamax or whatever else, because you can get Gigantamax Pikachu and Gigantamax Eevee in Sword and Shield. So, you could do that. Same thing, like, or whatever. So there's literally thousands of things that we could try to do, and whatnot. But, I just want to see what would interest you guys. This is what I think would be interesting, because I just don't think, like, outside of trying, like, something like the time trials, as I sort of said, or something like that, where it's, like, something a bit more different, like, you're trying to beat times, or you're trying to see what works, what strategy, or like obviously, as I said, no items in battle and whatnot, and things like that. And obviously there is glitches in some of the earlier games, like when you have the badge boost glitch in the OG first gen. It's like, oh yeah, well, you can't really do anything about that because it's just a mechanic that is in the game. It's not meant to be in the game. It is a glitch, but it is in the game and you can't really avoid it. So it's just one of those things that, you've got to understand and accept going into it, and saying, hey, well, that, double team doesn't just, or agility or whatever, doesn't just raise my defense, or doesn't just raise my whatever else stat that it was raising. It raises all my stats because of the badge boost list. So, things like that are, still to be thought of and whatnot. As I said before in a previous video as well, I want to do a listed version of games saying, hey, this is the changes that I would make to some of the games, like Pokemon starting moves, level up moves, whatnot, that sort of thing, how the gyms are laid out or whatnot, what Pokemon they start with. Like, we're starting with Gen 1, but I do want to know what people want to see the most of and things like that as well. So, you know, guys, let me know what you guys want to see with all of that stuff. And yeah, like, again, like, do you want to see more anime sort of reactions? I put out that video before. What do you guys want to see, basically, in regards to anything as well? That's fine. I just want to start fishing and seeing what you guys have to say and trying to put out some more content again. I will be putting out soon a video on the first gen, or something about the first gen and some of like the starters, I guess, because I think that's a good place to start, like, and whatnot, with you know, changing move sets in Gen 1 and whatnot and that sort of thing. It's going to be really tough, and I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, whether we're going to do it with like OG Gen 1 or Fire Red Leaf Green or Pokemon Let's Go mechanics, you know what I mean? So that's where I'm kind of at. I'm kind of thinking, you know, how would you, like, I think the games that you want to make better are the games that need to be made better. I think games that have something good like going for them, or are more thought out and have a better structure and whatnot, are games that I wouldn't really need to tinker with. So maybe I will just look at them and say, hey, you know, let's do this for, you know, the first gen, the OG Gen 1, and then let's do it for the remakes, and then, or like, you know, let's touch on the remakes. What did they do, like Fire Red Leaf Green? And then let's touch on, you know, just quickly, what did, Let's Go do, or Let's Go have a, you know, has a lot of the better ones for the most part. So we might be copying a lot of that stuff, but still, I still think there are a few that are a bit like questionable. So, but anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed this one, and hope you will join me again in another one.